this presentation is between you and your lunch, and given the long queues yesterday, I'm sure you'll be eager to get going at it. So I'll try not to delay too much on all of that. So this isn't necessarily a very technical presentation at all. Yes, there's going to be slides with some code in it, but they're there for demonstration purposes, kind of to show you. But it's more of a, well, SQL is a wonderful language. It's so wonderful that lots of companies have implemented it. Right? Despite them maybe bashing it and not liking it at one particular stage, they have come to creating their own kind of SQL interfaces to their data. So where the idea about this came from was years ago from me. So it was just like, when I read Lord of the Rings back a long time ago, it just reminded me so much of what I do on a daily basis of working with data. And the language that I use every day is SQL. And it's basically what can I do to access the data that I have, not just in the database, but across all my different data sources. And particularly over the last few years, this has become even more so. So this is kind of like, the quote from the Lord of the Rings. So the one ring to rule them all. Right? So it's basically, how does that relate to SQL? And I'll come back to this kind of at the end of the presentation. So it's kind of lots of other people have kind of copied this kind of idea of describing SQL. So who am I? I come from Ireland, so it's kind of stuck between two particular scenarios. So the only English-speaking country in Europe plus Malta. So so I have a blog. I'm a ACE director. If you Google me, make sure you put something sensibly in, like Oracle or data mining or stuff like that. Otherwise, you'll get a cage fighter based in New York, which is not me. Okay, and I've written a few books. So there's a book on Oracle data mining, book on Oracle or Enterprise, so that covers the advanced analytics option in the database. So there's lots on that. And then I've co-written another book that came out last year with two other speakers here at the conference, with Helly and Alex, on kind of using SQL, PL SQL. And then I have a more kind of book aimed at managers type thing of kind of the essentials of, it should be data science, so I just didn't get a chance to update the cover page and all of that. So that's coming out later on this year. So what about SQL? Right, one of the things that kind of came out a few weeks ago was an article about, SQL is 43 years old, and here's a whole load of reasons why we should use it. Hands up who's seen or read that article. Oh, okay, I'll put my hand down so I'm not the only one. Right, just go Google it. Right, it's a really good article because it helps to explain. It has been around. It is old technology. Old technology is boring. None of us wants to do it anymore. All right? Yeah, probably. More than likely. But there are lots and lots of different reasons why we want to be able to use this technology to better our skills, to better our experiences. Right? Because in a way, SQL is a bit kind of going around with the walking frame in a way, right? Or maybe we should be in the retirement home at this stage. But in reality, SQL is a bit of a superhero language, all right? And what I hope from everyone here in this room is that if you're in this room, you know how to write SQL. And maybe what we need to be a little bit more aware of is to do with, well, what else can we do with SQL? What else can we do with the SQL language? All right? So that we need to kind of embrace this language that we use on a daily basis. We need to love it a bit more. We need to understand it a little bit more. And if we do that, then we can actually get significantly more out of our day-to-day job. So what I'm going to address in the presentation is kind of like four main areas, which is the typical things we see associated with the database. So as we can store data, we can access data, we can analyze data, and we can protect data. And what I typically find when I go kind of talking to lots of different peoples and lots of different companies and lots of different countries is that we only use a tiny subset of the data. So let's have a look at the first bit, is just to do with, how do we go about analyzing data? Because, kind of analytics is a kind of very kind of popular and topic at the moment. But, probably if you kind of look through most of your work environments, is that you have queries that are just a little bit like that, all right, and probably not necessarily a huge amount more, or we might have like a group by, right? And a lot of queries is just that simple, right? Yeah, okay, we might be joining more tables, we might have a few more attributes in there, but what else can we do with all of this data, right? So let's have a look at when we start analyzing our data. What else can we do, all right? So you all know and understand those particular functions, all right? So I'm getting a bit of a nervous vibe going around the room, which is kind of, I was kind of expecting a little bit like that, because that kind of scares us. That brings us back to maybe our undergrad days, or kind of back to school education, kind of going like, oh my God, like I'd never understand that and I don't want to do it ever again. All right? And then we kind of sometimes get exposed to lots of people who like to show off with lots of those formulas, and they're kind of going like, we can use these to represent anything. So, there's plenty of hope there of lots of things kind of going on. So, what does this really mean? And then, like, the classic phrase, depending on what part of the world you come from, who you believe came up with it originally, is we have lies, damn lies, and statistics. Is that we all know and we have seen how statistics have been used to kind of address things or play things up and move things around a little bit more. So now we get to quiz time. So you remember those kind of few formulas I showed you a few minutes ago, or a few seconds ago? All right, let's do a quick quiz about do you actually know what they are and what the equivalent SQL function is? All right. So, are you sure? Oh, there's a bit of hesitancy there. All right. Yeah. Well, it's some. You're right. All right. But there's a bit of hesitancy, right? And the rest of you, how many would have gotten that right? Okay, less than half the room. Okay. What about this one? Be quite the. Yeah, average. What about this one? Oh, there's a bit more nervous laughter going around. It's just, all right, yeah, standard deviation, all right? And, okay, all right. Correlation, very good, all right? And this is probably something that most of us actually use quite a bit without actually realizing it, all right? So sometimes, when we're talking about analytics or analyzing our data, depending on who you're talking to, they'll either go, I'm using these functions, or I'm using these formulas. And for the vast majority of us, is we're using these functions, and do we really know or care about what happens behind the scenes? We've trusted that somebody's gone off and programmed it up correctly for us. People like us that have gone and programmed it up correctly. All right? So we can trust our own code. So, so there's lots of different kind of analytics in there. But what we need to be kind of careful of when we look at analyzing our data is that there's huge amount of functionality within the database that comes as standard in the database. Like no additional licensing extra required in the database for that to do most of it. Okay. Now there is other bits you can go and pay licensing to get some of the more kind of advanced features of it. But when we start using these analyticals and analyzing our data in a lot more detail, is that particularly when in more kind of recent times we've gotten far superior visualization techniques that help us to be able to present this across in a very useful way. And what we're effectively doing is we're getting to create stories. We're being able to see through some of these different visualizations and some of the drill downs, being able to use some of these analytical capabilities within the SQL language to get better insights in our data. So in a way is that, by using a lot of these kind of visualization techniques, we are using more of the analytical capabilities of the SQL language. And it's only now that all of that kind of stats work that we did as part of our educational system that we never understood and we just wanted to get through the exam and get out the other side in one piece, is now that we're starting to understand what they actually mean and the relevancy of those and how they can be applied to business scenarios. So kind of a real kind of leader in all of this, kind of going back quite a few years ago, was to do with the Gapminder project and Hans Rosling from Sweden, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year. So, and he was all about, we need to create stories about our data. It's not trying to show off about what techniques we've used or how much I know and understand those formulas I've used. Right? There's one guy I know, and what he does in all his presentations, he'll take 3 or 4 formulas, complex formulas, and he put them up on a slide. He never actually talks about them or explains them. But what it is, he distracts the audience by them trying to work out what that formula actually is. So while he's talking away, so nobody's really listening, right? So, and that's a deliberate plan by him, right? But when we start kind of looking at analytics, sometimes we are told how to do analytics, and the usual thing at the over the last kind of 5 years or so is we have to be using that wonderful language. How many of you use it? Oh, only a few hands going up. Interesting. All right. But what is the most commonly used tool for analytics around the world? Excel. All right. Yeah, it's Excel, isn't it? We can never get away from it. It should be Apex instead of Excel, shouldn't it? But yeah, that's what the business users use, right? So, there's lots of other kind of tools out there to help us to do analytics. But the one thing that people don't think of when it comes to analyzing data, to a much fuller extent, a more complex extent, the type of stuff that's being done in Excel, the type of stuff that's being done using our language, is that we can actually do the equivalent amount using the SQL language, or near equivalent amount using the SQL language. But most people don't realize this, right? So do we really need to use other tools and languages to be able to go and analyze our data? The typical answer in IT is, it depends, right? So it depends on your organization and the type of things that you want to go and get at. But I just want to point out, I'm a big fan of R, right? So I use it quite a bit. But it does have certain limitations. So the typical thing is, when we're using the languages, we need to pull data down onto my laptop or desktop, or even if I have a server installed, and to do the analytics, I need to push data back. And what we're doing is we're going around in circles here, right? And it becomes a bit of an issue because, if we take larger amounts of data around, and then we want to take more data, and then we want to take a bit more data, is that at some point we're going to run out of space, right? Because a lot of these, like Excel, how many of you have opened up an Excel document or a big Excel spreadsheet and you run out of memory? Yeah, right? We have the same problem here, right? So there is a bit of a scalability issue within all of this. But in order to do all of this, we are creating data silos, which is always a bad idea, right? So it's a bad approach to being able to go out. It doesn't scale. And one of the things that is really difficult to do is it's very difficult for us to integrate any solution that we come up with into any of our production environments. Now, a lot of the visualization tools are incorporating more kind of OR features and integration in that in order to make it easier, but they are following this approach. So if you're using OR in a visualization tool, you're pulling the data out of the database onto the local environment. It's then calling OR to process the data and then showing the results within the tool. Right? So we have some kind of scalability issues within this. So do we have scalability with performance issues? And the other thing is production deployment. So, if we want to kind of do any of this fancy stuff, build it into any of our applications, build analytics into being core for applications, we have to do lots of different coding. All right. But if I kind of look around the room, okay, there's a slightly different age profile in this room compared to an awful lot of Oracle conferences. All right. A lot of them are same age as me or slightly older, all right? So, and sometimes you kind of go, I'm getting a bit old for this newer stuff, all right? So it's kind of like, can we teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing? So, the reason I put the slide up, George Clooney's, well, my wife bought me an espresso machine a few years ago, hoping that it would have the desired effect. It didn't. So, it's just, we can't change, some things that have been kind of going on for a while. But what if we could use the language that we use day in, day out, and the skills that we already have to analyze our data before. So it's kind of like, did you know that the database has over 300 different statistical functions within the database? All right, and even within some of these functions, they've embedded multiple functions within it. All right. So the most typical ones that we come across are the ones here, highlighted in red, right? And then particularly if we can get into using some of the analytical functions, they're really great and really efficient and kind of replace an awful lot of work that might be going on in the different Excel spreadsheets. But when we start getting into talking about, all of these other different things, it's a bit of a, I didn't know that. So sometimes, it's like a horse with the blinkers on during a race, because you're keeping them concentrating on what's ahead of them so they can only focus in on that. So sometimes as developers, maybe we need to kind of take those kind of blinkers off from time to time and kind of look at, what else is available there within the language that we can actually go off and use. Now, typical thing we see is we have to use OR because it has, the first example to give, it has this wonderful function called summary that will kind of look at the data set and it will bring me back all of these wonderful statistics about it. And kind of going, really? Yeah? Well, I can do that in SQL. Well, PL SQL, all right? So I don't have to go out to use that wonderful OR function and associated other functions, is that I can come along and, with a little bit more code, right? But I can come along and do that using the language that I know without having to pull data out of the database, without creating those silos, without creating all of those different kind of security issues around it. So there's when you can get your hands on the slides, it's a bit chopped off at the top there. I have a blog post that goes through about how you can go about setting this up and getting it up and running on your own code. So we get to have a whole load of statistics using this particular functions, all really good. All right, so it's kind of like, there is a huge amount out there, right? There's a huge amount of functions and analytical capabilities within the database that we never really hear about. And why do we not hear about it? Why do we not have other people talking about it? Because they come as standards with the database. There's no extra licensing involved in handling these. So sometimes that's a bit boring, But we want to be able to talk about the stuff that sells licenses. But we have so many capabilities that comes for free. Well, you've already bought the database, but so is it free? But you know what I mean, all right? So as a slight nerdy thing that I went off and did one evening when I was bored, I went through the Oracle documentation, the index of it, and started to pick out all the different analytical and statistical functions within the database. So, believe it or not, there's actually over 300 different statistical functions within all of that list. So if you really want to, I have a blog post that lists those out. You can go and broaden your knowledge, broaden your skills, being able to incorporate that into your database and into your analytics and your reporting without having to go off and do other things, right? Without having to use other tools. Use the language that you know, because by doing this, we can ensure the security of our data. We're protecting our data because we no longer have to extract it out of the database, right? Things will be faster. Our analytics will be faster because, again, we don't have to pull the data out of the database, load it into a slower environment. Our database server is always going to be quicker, all right? So the no data movement, all right? So one of the things, again, if you start looking at some of the machine learning aspects of it, some of the timings that have been done comparing, say, the in-database machine learning versus doing the equivalent, say, using in OR, is that 90% of the time for doing the advanced analytics in pure OR is just purely taking the data out of the database. So it's kind of, we can eliminate all of that. We can get it pretty much in near real time. We click our fingers and we get our data back, and we can also ensure the security and integrity of our data so that we can have that easily, and then it's easy, very, very easy to deploy within our applications. So this is all really cool, yeah? So, it's just, cocktail time. So everyone enjoyed last night, yeah? So I was good. I went to bed early, so, or maybe I was boring. I went to bed early. So. All right, so this is all really good. So So we can do lots and lots of different analytics using the skills that we already have. We just need to open up and kind of get out that documentation, get out that index, and kind of go through it and being able to see what is particularly capable rather than having to go and use lots and lots of other tools. But what if we want to get into the more hardcore machine learning aspects of analytics? All right. So within that is, well, we can go off and use other tools, or I can just use SQL. All right. So the first bit that we have is we have the, okay, this is additional license costs, so hence the money. We can use the machine learning, all right? No data movement. I can use a few simple select statements and a little bit of PL SQL, and I can be doing really complex machine learning within all of that. But if we're a big kind of, we have a big team of data scientists, and they love using the R language, is that how do we go about productionalizing it? And again, if you've bought the Advanced Analytics option, you also get Oracle R Enterprise, which is a way of being able to run R inside the database as part of the database server. Okay, so you get to use the scalability, the performance features. You don't have to worry about memory management to a certain extent, and it scales, with all our different data. So, what I was saying is that a few different SQL statements. All right, for what we have over here is we have 3 different PL SQL packages for doing machine learning. Well, there's really one, which is the first one. The other 2 are kind of complementary. All right, and then we only have about 15 or 18 different SQL functions that we can go and do machine learning. Really simple, really quick. And again, if you go back to your work on Wednesday or Thursday, you can come along and start creating machine learning models, predictive analytics really quickly. But something that isn't talked about hugely, or kind of, again, something that's good to be aware of, come 12C, if you're on 12C, they have this thing called predictive queries. Now, it's a little bit confusing in some of the documentation. Sometimes they call it dynamic queries, predictive queries, and I think they've used 2 other different phrases from it. So you need to kind of watch out from this. So this is a way of going, I'm going to trust Larry has done a good job, and what I'm going to say is I'm going to let Larry go off and do the machine learning, all the complex data science stuff behind the scenes, and it's going to come back and tell me an answer. So I'm going to say is, here's some data, Larry, you go do all the complex stuff and just bring me back an answer. So let's have a quick look at this, all right? So we have a SQL statement, and we have this prediction function. And within this prediction function, what this is going to do is what's known as a classification type problem. So here's some data. So take all the data from this table, look at and examine this attribute, and build a predictive model that will, for that data, and apply it to that data. And if you go run that, you'll get your answer back in less than a second, right? And that's running off against, was it about 6,000 records? So it's that's on my VM. So it's always going to be significantly slower. So that's really, really quick, really efficient. So again, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, go start running some of this on your own data, and you can start telling your boss you're a data scientist, right? So it's kind of really good. So we can start doing lots of more complex analytics or advanced analytics or machine learning by writing a very simple SQL function. Okay, very quick, really efficient about doing it. The other thing that's really, really cool about it is that when we get to a scenario where we have, in this particular case, is what the data is divided out across whatever number of different countries. They were actually listed. It's 19 different countries. So if you're the data scientist, they'll have to go as, well, we need to create 19 different machine learning models for doing this. Not if you're an Oracle developer. Okay. All I need to do is, like in using analytical functions, is I need to do a partition by. And that means that our Uncle Larry, within the database, will automatically partition the data based on the different values within that attribute and create a separate machine learning model on it and go off and do it. Really quick, really efficient. Yeah, when you go to run this one, it's not necessarily in less than a second. It'll still be less than a second, but there's a little pause. and then it comes back. Again, run on a VM on machine. So, be a lot slower than any sort of production server. So this allows us to do really complex analytics with some very simple SQL functions. You see how simple that is to be able to go and write, and yet you're using all the complex capabilities within the database without having to know anything about the formulas. So getting back to like our sum function, our correlation, our standard deviation, our average functions, is that other people have been able to build up these algorithms for you. You don't have to go and write the algorithms to go about doing it. So huge amount of additional capability and analytical capability with the analytical functions, and an awful lot of that kind of machine learning aspects that I've just shown you kind of falls under that particular umbrella. Okay, but there's no escaping the oral language. So just kind of a quick demo of that is, here's an example. It's a bit more complicated code, but this is where I can actually take some OR code. So I can do up an OR script, which will, this one loads in a data source. So this loads in a predictive model that's been generated using OR and is stored in the database. It'll then take the data input and apply that particular model to the data. We get the scored values, and then we return the data set. This is the SQL that kind of defines it. It's a little bit complicated, but we get the results coming back. Again, that's a way of being able to take something that maybe your data scientist teams, or if the capability doesn't exist within the database but exists within our language, we can easily integrate that within the database and then greatly expand all our different analytics. How often do we get a new version of the database? Every 10 years. 2 years-ish? 5. So it's kind of 12.1, then we had 12.2. So kind of roughly every 2 years. And it's just like, how many new analytical capabilities will come into the database? Probably a small number, right? Because there's so many other things that they need to go looking at. Is that by doing this, we can now incorporate is that if a new function, this magical function that nobody's ever discovered before, comes available in our language, we can easily, within about a minute, now have that capability within the database. Long before most of us have been working with databases, but it has stood the test of time. And within this is that we typically are accessing data in our relational tables. But a database, modern databases, are no longer just relational databases. Right? We can do so much more. We can access data so in lots of different places. So the typical thing where we start accessing the data is that we can start accessing data in excuse me, in external files. So we can incorporate data that isn't normally incorporated or easily incorporated into our databases or available in our database. We can query it as if it was in our database, and we can query it as well as data within our database. So multiple kind of different ways of being able to process that data. Additionally, if we have JSON data that's stored externally, again, we can define that as being accessible from the database. So we start creating this kind of physical layer of having lots of different types of data in lots of different structures and lots of different formats that we keep using the SQL language as the common interface to be able to access all of this. Similarly, if we have JSON data stored in the database, I can come along and start querying it along with existing relational tables or even data in my external files. Spatial and graph. Spatial data has been in the Oracle database since when? 8? It's going back a hell of a long time. All right. So, and it's being used around the world and by lots of different governments and local governments and councils being able to kind of chart what kind of data do we have. Again, we can go query that as if it's any other data within the database. We can join up with data coming from JSON, from our relational tables, from our external files, or whatever format or variety that we want to be able to get at. We also have a variety of different NoSQL databases that we can connect in. And similarly, with Hadoop. and on Hadoop with all the different kind of variety of different formats and data storage mechanisms, we can now connect, well, okay, some of them using the Oracle Big Data SQL, being able to connect all of those into the database, again, using the language that we know and love to be able to go access that data, not just out in a Hadoop or a variety of different kind of storage mechanisms there, but also in our tables and our JSON external files, incorporate spatial data all within kind of one sets of queries within our database. So we've looked at storing and accessing, we've looked at analyzing, all right? So there's a huge variety of things we can do with our SQL language, right? What about protecting our data? Now, how many people have suffered this back earlier, from these kind of scenarios earlier this year? Anybody willing to admit it? No, nobody's going to admit kind of the issues relating to that. But we do have kind of some security issues, and it's not just isolated particular problems. It's things that we have across our entire organization, right? And no matter what kind of data source that we're going to be using. But if we kind of take all of these different data sources that are kind of just talked about that we can easily query and analyze within our database using the SQL language, that common interface to our database, is we can also start applying the different kind of security features that exist within the database to allow us to protect that data. So instead of us having to go off and write queries and do different securities on each of these different data sources as separate items, is that we can consolidate an awful lot of that using the security features within the database, and we can standardize on who gets access to what. Because one of the things that I have seen is that, well, whatever the security privileges we put on our tables is, if we go out onto Hadoop, is, we'll look at that another time. The security becomes a little bit of a later issue. Or if it does get applied, then it's not applied in the same way as what is applied over here. So Brendan has been given certain privileges on data over here, but the equivalent data over here, he has completely different privileges, which is, we're getting inconsistencies across our organization and, lots of issues associated with that. So by having this common interface of kind of using the Oracle database, using the SQL language, we can standardize on our security policies and on our procedures that can be applied across all the different data within our organization to one interface and make it consistent across it all. So we're coming to the final stages of this. So this is kind of, it was a quick kind of presentation. So we've kind of looked at the store, access, analyze, and protect. But we've all done this using the SQL language. We can all do this. So we need to kind of take, 1 hour out of your week, open up the documentation as someone kind of, it was kept on saying, is, like RTFM. Right, just read the documentation, right? So we need to take that time to kind of take off our blinkers, go look at some of these kind of more random topics, within the SQL language to see how that can actually fit in within our current capabilities, and being able to expand our skills and being able to improve performance, improve our scalability, improve the type of analytics we have, reduce the number of tools and programs that we need to be able to use and ensure everything is there in one place. So really, SQL is king, is the number one king language, which kind of goes back to the opening slide, which is to do with, SQL is 43 years old or young, all right? So lots of other products have been made attempts to SQL, so old-fashioned, let's go do something else. Different ways of accessing the data, yet they're starting to come back to using the SQL language. So kind of make sure you kind of go out and being able to use what you have so that, you can become a bit of a SQL superhero within your own organization, which comes back to the Lord of the Rings reference at the beginning. So we have the one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. So it's kind of like, years and years ago, kind of like, SQL is the one language to rule them all, one language to find them, one SQL to bring them all, and in the database bind them, or it's the one language, right? So the one language to rule them all. So yeah, so that's I really believe in that. So it's kind of like, we need to believe in this language that we use every day. We need to embrace it a bit more than we actually do. We need to love it a bit more, and we all need to make SQL great again. All right. So it's just, all right. All right. And you too can be a SQL superhero. All right. Now, one of the things that's quite interesting is, see this here, that kind of logo. Has somebody ever used it? Okay. What do you use as your SQL logo? The old kind of SQL plus icon? Or something like that? Or you don't really use anything? Yeah. So, before Open World, not last year, the year before, I needed something to show SQL and PL SQL, right, in my presentations. I didn't want to use the SQL plus icon. So I came up with these. And I kind of put them out on Twitter and kind of go, oh, what do you think of these? And then immediately, certain people from a certain organization that we all know came back and said, they are great. Where did you get them? I just made them up. Then zilch. They weren't allowed to talk about it after that. So kind of stickers on that. If you Google me, you find the website Analytics. If you kind of, there's a tab there where you can go download them and go use them. Okay, so not for commercial purposes, but if you want to use it in any of your presentations and go use. And unfortunately, I didn't bring enough stickers, so I have a few variants of them here. So if you want to kind of come down and take one each or something like that. So unfortunately, there isn't one for everyone in the audience. So it's just So I love SQL. I believe in SQL. Hence the hoodie. Hence the T-shirt. All right. And the hat, right? So, yeah, anyway, so that's it. Thank you. Any questions? Make it easy.
Those predictive functions, are they only in enterprise? Predictive functions you were talking about.
So predictive queries,
standards, additional paid. What was the case?
Yeah. So the predictive queries is in the enterprise edition.
Enterprise.
Yeah.
Additionally paid or just?
You need to talk to your sales rep about that.
Okay. So I need to search for the DBA feature usage statistics for it. Yeah.
So yeah. So you need to just clarify. It's a bit of a grey area. I've never gotten a proper answer. I've asked many salespersons and they've never come back with an answer. So.
Typical.
All right. So it's kind of talk to your local sales representative before you go use it. But anything that I showed you about, all those kind of standardized over 300 different statistical functions, they come as part of the Express edition upwards. Okay.